Somewhere in the crowd, one voice cut through the roar. Sharp, hateful, venomous. "Is Freddie gay?" New York City, August 1982. Madison Square Garden pulsed like a living heart. A Queen concert that would start like any other and end as one of the most defining nights of Freddie Mercury's career. The arena was packed, a sea of 50,000 flashing lights and glitter jackets. The crowd pulsed like electricity, waiting for the first notes of Somebody to Love. Freddie walked out in his white tank top, chest bare, energy on fire. But behind that confident strut was a man still haunted by headlines. Is Freddie gay? Queen frontman's wild nights. The early 80s were not kind to men like him. As the lights hit his face, a wave of adrenaline crashed through his veins. But somewhere in the crowd, one voice cut through the roar. Sharp, hateful, venomous. A single slur that sliced the night in half. It was loud enough to echo across the sound system. The band froze for a split second. Freddie's smile vanished. The show, his sanctuary, had just been violated. And in that moment, he had a choice. Ignore it like every other time, or make history. Before we dive into the night Freddie Mercury faced hate and turned it into history, subscribe. Because this is one of those stories that reminds us why courage still matters. To understand what Freddie did that night, you have to understand what it meant to be Freddie Mercury in 1982. Behind the sequin jackets and champagne parties was a man who had learned to wear armor disguised as confidence. The world adored him, but only as long as he played a version of himself they could handle. He was born Farrokh Bulsara, a boy from Zanzibar who learned early that difference could be dangerous. Moving to England, he hid parts of himself to survive. As Queen became the biggest band in the world, he created Freddie Mercury, the invincible performer. But offstage, whispers followed him everywhere. Rumors about lovers, about his nightlife, about who he really was. Backstage before that concert, Freddie had been unusually quiet. Peter Freestone, his assistant, remembered the silence. He just stared at his reflection for minutes, not adjusting his outfit, just looking, like he was preparing for battle. He knew the slurs would come. They always did. But he never expected one to come that loud, that public, that personal. The insult hit mid-song. They were halfway through Tie Your Mother Down, Brian May's guitar screaming, Roger Taylor pounding the drums, when it happened. Between verses, as Freddie moved toward the edge of the stage, a voice from the front rows shouted the word. For a second, everything stopped. The guitars went quiet. The drums faded. The air itself seemed to freeze. You could hear the static of the amplifiers buzzing through the silence. Freddie turned his head slowly toward the section of the crowd. The spotlight caught his face, half fury, half heartbreak. Thousands of fans stood confused, not sure what had just happened. Brian May looked toward him, waiting for a signal. But Freddie didn't move. His hand gripped the microphone stand tighter. You could almost feel the weight of years pressing down. The taunts, the tabloids, the loneliness of being adored but never understood. And then, in that stillness, he did something no one expected. He stopped the entire concert. His voice came out calm, too calm. "Stop! Stop the music!" The command echoed through the speakers, slicing through the tension like glass. The crowd gasped. The band froze mid-beat. Freddie stood motionless at center stage, staring into the dark. Every camera in the arena caught it. The look in his eyes that said this wasn't just about one word. It was about every word ever thrown at him. Every headline, every whisper. The audience waited. The silence stretched long enough to make hearts pound. Then Freddie spoke again. His tone sharp, defiant, and cold. "If you came here to hate, you can get the hell out. This stage doesn't belong to you. It belongs to music." Gasps rippled across the arena. No one breathed. Brian May, standing a few feet away, later said in an interview, "I'd never seen him like that." It wasn't anger. It was power. Freddie pointed toward the section where the slur had come from. "You called me something," he said. "Well, darling, I've been called worse by better people." The audience erupted. Cheers drowned out the silence. But Freddie wasn't done. He raised his mic again, pacing the front of the stage. "Let me tell you something. This stage, this music, belongs to everyone. It doesn't care who you love, what you look like, or where you come from. If you don't get that, then you don't belong here." The crowd roared. Roger Taylor hit his snare twice, bang bang, like punctuation marks. Freddie looked out into the sea of faces, his breathing heavy, chest glistening with sweat under the spotlights. "Do you see them?" he said, pointing at his bandmates. "We're four men from four completely different worlds. We don't even come from the same planet sometimes. But when we're up here, we're one thing. That's what Queen means." In that moment, it wasn't just Freddie talking. It was every artist who'd ever been mocked for who they were. Every fan who'd ever been told they didn't belong. He tilted his head, smirked, and added, "Now, shall we try that one again, darling?" The band exploded back into the song. But something had shifted. The concert wasn't just a concert anymore. It was defiance set to music. When the show ended, the crowd was still on their feet. People were crying, cheering, hugging strangers. But backstage, the mood was tense. Freddie stormed into his dressing room, ripped off his armband, and threw his mic stand across the floor. Peter Freestone followed quietly, closing the door. "You shouldn't have to do that," Freddie said, voice shaking. "You shouldn't have to defend your existence just to sing." Brian came in a few minutes later, concern written across his face. "You did the right thing, Fred." Freddie lit a cigarette, hands trembling slightly. "Maybe, or maybe I just gave them another reason to hate me." Roger Taylor leaned on the doorway. "You didn't give them a reason. You gave the rest of us one to be proud." Freddie didn't answer. He just stared at the mirror again. That same reflection from before the concert. Only this time, he didn't see emptiness. He saw fire. The next morning, every newspaper headline told the same story. Freddie Mercury stops. Concert over homophobic slur. Some praised him as a hero. Others called him reckless, emotional, controversial. The conservative press mocked him, calling it a stunt. But fans flooded Queen's mailboxes with letters. Thousands of them. Men, women, teenagers. People writing, "Thank you for standing up for us." One letter stood out. It was from a young man in Texas. He wrote, "I thought I was the only one like me. Watching you stop that concert showed me I'm not alone. You saved my life that night." Freddie read that letter silently, folded it, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. He kept it there for months. From that night on, every show he played carried a new kind of energy. It wasn't just about spectacle anymore. It was about message. The costumes, the attitude, the unapologetic flamboyance, all of it became a symbol of resistance. But privately, Freddie still wrestled with fear. The AIDS crisis was spreading like wildfire across the world, and rumors swirled around him constantly. Every cough, every canceled interview became tabloid gossip. The night of the incident, he told Peter, "You know, darling, I used to think if I just sang louder than the rumors, they'd stop. But they don't. They never stop." Peter asked him if he regretted what he said on stage. Freddie smiled weakly. "No, but I do regret not saying it sooner." That was the paradox of Freddie Mercury. Fearless on stage, fragile off it. He could command 100,000 people with a wink, but behind closed doors, he feared dying misunderstood. And yet, that one night, that one defiant stand, became a turning point. For him, for the band, for countless fans who saw themselves in his courage. Years later, Brian May would recall that concert as the night Freddie became unstoppable. Reporters kept asking him about it. Freddie always brushed it off. "I'm just a musician, darling, not a politician." But everyone knew that wasn't true. He changed something bigger than music that night. The conversation, the perception, the silence. Even decades later, fans who had been there would remember that moment vividly. The hush, the tension, the explosion of applause. They said it felt like witnessing history, not written by governments or laws, but by a man in a white tank top, standing his ground against hate, and that was Freddie's greatest weapon. Not rage, but grace. He didn't lecture, he performed. He turned humiliation into triumph, hate into harmony. Freddie Mercury didn't just change music, he changed how people saw themselves. That night proved that courage could wear eyeliner, that strength could sing falsetto, that love could stand on a stage and say, "I am who I am, and I'm not going anywhere." In his final years, when illness began to take his body, his spirit only grew stronger. He would say, "You can't kill who I am. You can only make people remember me louder." And they did. Today, when fans wave rainbow flags at Queen tribute concerts, they're not just honoring his music. They're honoring the man who, in one split second of silence, turned a slur into a statement heard around the world. Because Freddie Mercury didn't just stop a concert, he stopped time. He showed the world what real power looks like. The kind that doesn't shout to be heard, it sings. If Freddie's courage moved you, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and tell us, what do you think real bravery looks like? Because just like Freddie, your voice might inspire someone you'll never meet.